Welcome to the Aaron Werner Podcast on EyeCode Media. Today I've got all the way from across the pond, Sarah, who's going to be joining us. Sarah and I have met multiple times electronically over Zoom and then got to meet in person at Vision Expo East this year. I had a wonderful conversation over coffee, and so I'm excited that we get to bring her to the podcast, and you all get to meet the incredible person that I got to meet. So, Sarah, give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself.
Okay, so hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm currently CEO of retinal imaging company epipole. So we make a handheld retinal camera. I've worked in manufacturing my whole career, which I guess is how we got talking about all the things that we talked about, because, you know, efficiency and productivity are big things for me. I went to university a long time ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and I did a degree in laser physics and optoelectronics, closely followed by a master's in laser engineering. And I worked in the defence industry for a while, doing target designator and laser rangefinder design, and I worked on the Apache helicopter program. So that was pretty cool. And then I went to a wee startup company in Scotland, not far from where I am now, which was called Optos. So it's not a wee startup company anymore. Yep. I went there in January 2000 and I was there for 20 years. And I worked between R&D and operations my whole career there. So I started off in R&D, so some of the very original panoramic 200 design I did. And then I moved into operations and really started to learn about productivity and efficiency and how to scale when we introduced Daytona in Optos. So that was really the game changer in terms of, you know, we had to go from making 30 a month to 200 a month in 6 months. So that was a rapid learning opportunity. So yeah, so that's a bit about me. After Optos, I went to National Manufacturing Institute Scotland to set up a National Manufacturing Institute here in Scotland, and I was there for a couple of years, 2.5 years, but I really missed making things, so I was delighted with the opportunity to move to epipole and start making things again and scale production. Yeah, so
that is quite the story, and I feel my life is really boring. I've never worked on stuff like laser rangefinders and Apache helicopters.
Yeah, I never got to go in one. I got to see them being built, but I didn't get to go in one. So that was a bit of a miss.
Nice. Well, that's pretty exciting, and I never, quite honestly, I remember as a doctor we purchased and upgraded our P200 to a Daytona back in 2012, I think. So I got to go to Scotland, the manufacturing plant, and we'll share that experience in a little bit. But that was kind of the first eye-opening for me that manufacturing, there's a lot more that goes into it than just putting stuff together.
Yeah.
And then have since been able to see multiple other manufacturing plants, whether it's contacts or frames, but the science behind it. But I don't think anybody quite brings the sexy to manufacturing and the efficiencies and whatnot and the excitement that you do, especially when I talk to you. And I left our meeting in Florida just with all sorts of ideas on what to do back at the office, which quickly got met with some resistance because they told me I wasn't allowed to put blue tape around the mouse and the keyboard and everything else to ensure everything had a spot. But definitely some efficiencies. So that's what I'm hoping to get into today, and really just what you did over at Optos, which I think was incredibly impressive, and what we can take in our private practices. So I remember distinctly when we went over there in the manufacturing plant, and I think you were one of the guides, but we went to this beautiful building on this huge plot of land. There's green everywhere I looked outside the building, and they were telling the story about how I believe they were asked to reduce their footprint or just be 15% more efficient, something along that line. And I raised my hand and said, well, you have all this land, why don't you just build a bigger building? And I can't remember who, but somebody said, well, that sounds like the dumbest American thing that I've heard. Right? Why would we build when we can just be more efficient? And I laughed about it. I guess it sounded very American, but and quote me on the numbers. I can't remember what the ask was, but whatever the outcome, the team had blew away what the ask was on being more efficient, right?
Yeah.
And
so we did when we first went to build Daytona. I mean, we had that factory space in Dunfermline, and we were making P200s, P200Cs, P200MAs in that space, and we needed space to build Daytona as well. And we were using the whole floor space for the P200s. And so we just said, right, so what we need 50% of the space back. So when you went into that factory, you went in a door, which is kind of at the side of a long room. So we just said, right, we're going to split it at this door, and this side is going to be P200, and this side is going to be Daytona, and then we'll work it out from there. And I think so you were in that factory, and it had corridors taped and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
And if you said, give me 10% of the space back, right? All we would have done was make the corridors narrower, right? That's, we would have made them the narrowest they could be. And when you say, let's get 50% of the space back, right, you have to think about it really differently. But I think that the really important thing in all of that stuff is about engaging the team with it, right? So it's not just a case of explaining why do we need to do this, right? We've got this other product coming through. This is really important for the growth of the company. We've got lots of orders for this product already, and it's not in manufacturing, and we need to get to this capacity, right? And it all sounds, it actually sounds, impossible. When you say, we make 30 of these a month, well, we need to make 200 of these a month, we need half the space back and all that kind of thing. But it's just about small chunks, right? So it's about taking barriers away. And some of the really important things that we did early on in that space, it's like any other building, any other room, right? All the power outlets are around the wall, right? And that's not where you need them to be, but they're all there. So all the equipment is round the wall, right? Yep. And you end up with this space in the middle where you just keep stuff because, everything's just round the wall. So we put a grid of power and network in the ceiling. So it just looks, that building is just a factory. So it's got, a typical factory corrugated roof and all that kind of thing. You can see all the ducting and stuff. And we just put a grid of power and network in the ceiling, because that means you can put anything anywhere. And plug it in anywhere and connect it anywhere. But the thing is that you still have to be able to move things around. So what we did was we put wheels on everything. Now, Rob Kennedy, who was the finance director at the time, said, how much money have you spent on wheels, Sarah? And I was like, quite a lot, and I'm not really done, right? But so that did two things for us. We were really, really good before that at paralysis by analysis. We didn't change anything because the impact was unknown, and so you would have to build ahead and make sure that you could recover from anything that went wrong. And once you make it easy to move things, you do, right? Yeah. So we just made it easy to move stuff, and then we moved it around, and we crammed all that stuff that took up the whole factory space into half the factory space, and we're like, okay, we need to make this move faster because we can't have all this work in progress. And then all the things that we learned from that we then applied to Daytona, because making it move faster is about solving the problems that keep it moving slowly, right? So
so you made a comment I want to go back to, because you said you don't know what the future holds, so you, as a manufacturing plant, you can't, make 100 units and then hope they sell, right? You don't want to not have units ready to go. So you're constantly judging what I need to turn, speed up, slow down, make more of, and whatnot. Had the geniusness of really two simple things is what I just heard there on the outcomes of putting power grid in the ceiling. There's some cost to that, but it's really not that hard to run electrical and outlet boxes. and then putting wheels on stuff so
Yep.
that you could move it, right? It's so simple, yet it sounds like incredibly effective.
It is really simple, and I think that's what I've found with all the things that we did at Optos, with all the things that I've done elsewhere. It's actually really it's the simple things that are most effective, right? But I call that making it easy to do the right thing, right? So no one comes to work to do the wrong thing. Everyone comes to do the right thing. But sometimes we make it really difficult to do the right thing. There's lots of paperwork to be done, or, whatever, right? So it can be easy to do the wrong thing, actually. If you make it easy to do the right thing, then people will do the right thing. And we got to a stage, obviously, as that process sort of matures, right? And you get used to moving things around. We got to a stage where if we were having a tour, I would need to go out to the shop floor in the morning to make sure I'd remembered where everything was, right? Because people moved things all the time. And I think that was the other thing that we did when we started to do this sort of make these improvements. We committed time to making improvements. So every business says it's really important that we make improvements, that we make changes. But if it is really important, then you'll put aside time to do those things. You'll give your team time to do those things. And so we ended up having a thing we called Kaizen Time, and we did it for 2 hours every Tuesday morning. So it wasn't the first day of the week. You could kind of get everything moving again. But then we took out 2 hours, and everybody had the same 2 hours, and the majority of that time it was self-directed stuff, because people were coming up with their own ideas. But to start off with, it kind of had to be a bit more directed, with people saying, right, this is what we're doing now. And then eventually everybody realises that they're actually allowed to change stuff, right? And so they go ahead and change stuff. And the tape on the floor actually is a huge step forward, because tape's also really easy to move, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like walls. And in that factory, we had a sort of programme of taking walls down, and we also didn't put walls up, right? So anything new that was coming in, we had to find a mobile way of doing things. One of the best examples of that actually was goods in inspection, right? So when parts come in, sometimes you want to inspect them.
Yep.
And the right place, the building next door to the factory was the warehouse where all the component parts were stored. So the right place to have goods in inspection is where the goods are delivered in the stores. The stores is dirty, right? The doors are open all the time. There's forklifts going round, trucks come into the back. But actually inspecting it in the production area isn't the right place to do it. So we wanted to create an area that was cleaner, and that we could do the inspection in. And we were having this sort of discussion about it. And one of the things I hate as well is doors, right? Doors are a terrible waste of space, right? Because when you open them, you have to keep space behind it clear so that you can open it, right? So doors that slide into the wall are better because they don't take up space. Yep. But, I was saying, like, I don't really want doors and I don't really want walls. And they were like, do you just want walls that we can walk through? And I was like, yes, I do actually. That's exactly what I want, right? And so we made this, I call it Big Boys Meccano, right? So, the Meccano that you used to get when you were a kid, we had lots of that. And we built this structure, and it had sort of like fans in the ceiling, so positive airflow within it.
Okay.
And it was really just a box with wheels, right? And these fans in the ceiling and lights. And it could plug into the powering network as well. And we put on, it's like PVC curtain, that you might see in a morgue or a butcher's or something like that,
right.
But it was clear, right? And then you could actually walk through any part of the wall, right?
That's genius, right? You could walk through the parts of the wall. You had the positive air pressure keeping it clean, just from a fan, right?
Yep, and we had a big a big screen in there so that we could put up technical drawings, and so you don't have old-fashioned paper drawings, and you could zoom in, so all that kind of stuff. So people could be inspecting the parts, So everything that you needed was there. The terminal was there so that the parts were being booked into inspection and then could be booked out of inspection, either because they passed or because they needed to be returned. So people could do their job from that area. And also the other benefit that it brought that we didn't realise was that, it wasn't intentional when we started, was that, so the warehouse team just piled up the things beside the room that needed to be inspected. So the team within the room can see this is what's still to be done, right? So there's no like, I didn't know it was there or anything like that. Is sitting right there. So that's, to be inspected, and then you have a pile at the other side, which is completed inspection. And it's just that, it's those kinds of things, and it's those kind of, I love those random conversations where people are getting frustrated and they go, just want to walk through walls. And it's like, actually, that would be really good, wouldn't it? If we could walk through walls. And it's also very simple.
Yeah, super simple. So I would, hindsight's 2020. So looking back, I'm like, well, wheels on things makes sense, right? Walking through walls makes sense, but getting to that point, I find sometimes that we get stuck in the walls that our brains have made up, right? This is, I can only operate within this structure, whatever that structure is. I'm looking at a desk and it doesn't have wheels, and so it never crosses my mind to put wheels on it. How do you sit with your team? 'Cause I full agreement that we need our team's buy-in, and they've got most of the good ideas. But how do you help them break down those mental barriers and mental guardrails that says you have to operate just within these parameters? So they think of things like walking through walls and wheels and electric grids.
Yeah. So I think that's part of going on that journey together, right? But it's also, what I find is really, really helpful is going to see other places, right? So going to other factories, going to other workplaces. So there's a big thing in manufacturing called standard work, right? And standard work is we do the same thing every single time, right? And if we change the standard, everybody changes the standard. So that means that you have, manufacturing instructions and all that kind of thing, right? The best place to see standard work is a fast food chain like McDonald's or Burger King or something, and probably advertising so other fast food chains are available. But, because that's standard work in action. You see the impact of someone like me who doesn't like pickles and who doesn't like mustard, right? If I go there and I'm like, I want a burger but no pickles, no mustard, it takes ages, right?
Yeah,
whereas, my husband who loves all that stuff is just like, it just comes straight off the shelf, right? So and it's going to see places that are not necessarily connected to, you think, when we started thinking, we need to go out and see other factories, there aren't many other places close by that make, desktop retinal imaging devices. That's not really, there's not a big cluster of them here. So there's not even really very many medical device manufacturers, and particularly medical devices, you get stuck in this, we're so heavily regulated that we can't change anything. And that's not true. And so you have to get out and about and see things. And one of my, I've had the privilege of serving on Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Board. I was on there for 7 years, and I chaired it for 5. But I met lots of other different manufacturing companies, and I went to big oil and gas company, because we have a lot of oil and gas up in Aberdeen. They make big parts, big connectors and things like that for big pipes that go into the North Sea and all that kind of stuff. And they have an incredible picking system for orders, right? And it's all like some sort of bot thing talks to you and it tells you where to go, and it works out the most efficient route round the warehouse and everything like that for you to pick those things. And I was like, where did you come up with that? They went to a L'Oreal makeup factory to see that in action. Yeah. So there was all these big burly guys from oil and gas went to a lipstick factory to see that being done. And it's that kind of thing. It's like, go places that are outside your comfort zone. see things. There's never been a visit that I have done that I've not learned something, right? Not everything might be relevant, but that sparks the conversations, right?
Yep.
That's how you bring your team out of their comfort zone. You take them to a place that's out of their comfort zone. It sparks a conversation about maybe we could implement something like that. Did you see how they do that? Because if you ask questions about what problem are you trying to solve there, how did you solve that problem, then that helps you understand a bit more about how to solve the problems that you have. So I think it's those things, and then just encouraging that discussion. My favourite days in the office are days where we talk about what about this and what about that, and we're all fighting for the marker for the whiteboard, and we love a post-it, and all that kind of stuff, just to think how could we do that? How could we fix that thing? I think that, so just removing people from their workplace and taking them somewhere outside their comfort zone can really help with that, I think.
The Myopia Collective. Cooper Vision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. I like that a lot too. I've also heard that in those sessions that nobody's allowed to criticize an idea, right? Any idea is a good idea, even if it's, we're going to sprinkle pixie dust, right? Everybody celebrates that idea, just to get all the ideas on the whiteboard, and then you can go.
Yeah, yep. I mean, we had a way of, so when we looked at sort of how to do, like maybe how to, problems that we needed to solve, like things that we could do to make things better, like whether it's using barcodes, because, design engineers, and I used to be one, I love them dearly, but they think in hex and binary, right? So they'll give you a 32-digit code that you need to put in to mimic some sort of safety test. And, the amount of finger trouble on that and typing that stuff in is huge, right? And just having a barcode that you can scan that does that every single time correctly makes a huge difference. So we had sessions where we talked about things like that, and we got the post-its up for all of the ideas for each process stage or whatever to say, like, these are the things that we could solve. Here are things that would improve this process. And then we literally just drew a grid, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the y-axis was impact, so low impact, high impact, and the x-axis was effort, low effort, high effort, right? And just divide it into 4. And then we took each post-it in turn. And basically how we decided, so impact is easier, like it will save you 20 minutes or it will save you 20 seconds, right? That kind of thing. Or it'll improve a yield or something like that. So you can the impact you can everybody agrees on. And so we just had a rule for effort. And effort was, can we do it by ourselves? Not how long will it take, but can we do it by ourselves? Or do we need another team to help us, like the IT team or something like that? And so if we could do it by ourselves, it was low effort. And if we needed someone else to help us, it was high effort, right? Yep. So you pretty much never, and then we just place the post-its, right? So we pretty much never did any of the high effort, low impact things, right? Yep. But we would do all of the high impact, low effort things, right? And so what that does is it says all these ideas are valuable, right? And we're not dismissing any of these ideas, but because of the amount of time it takes, or because of the amount of effort it's going to take, it's going to be more difficult to implement. So we're going to do the easy ones first, the quick ones, high impact, low effort. What you would be mad not to do them, right?
Yep.
And actually, even if that's all that you do, and then you review the process again, your assessment of what needs fixed will have changed, because you have made those changes. So when you look at that process again, it will have changed. But that says everyone's been heard. All of the ideas are up there. We all had a chance to talk about them, and we all agreed what ones we were doing first. So it means that nobody feels, disenfranchised or disengaged with that process, because everyone's had the opportunity to input. And there are some of them that you look at and you think, I'm not really sure that's worth doing, but it is worth doing because of the impact it has on the people. Yep. And you can't underestimate that, right? Because they feel engaged. They feel like, that was my problem. I was allowed to fix that. Let's find the next problem, right? So even although you think that 10 seconds or 20 seconds that's going to save us, doesn't really going to make a huge difference right now. The impact that has on the person is massive. And so there's a lot of times that you just kind of have to smile and say, okay, let's do those things, right? Because what's it costing you? A wee bit of their time that you're giving them already to do that stuff anyway.
Oh, exactly. And it says that they're heard. So listening to that, it reminds me a lot of the EOS system. So from the book Traction, EOS, they have their delegate and elevate grid, and on what you should do. But I think it's genius to constantly go back and re-put things on the grid, and doing the high impact, low effort, the easy wins. Let's get the most out of it, and then reassessing. In fact, the one that comes to mind quickest that I've seen recently is I think last year, a year ago, 2 years ago in the office, somebody brought up the idea of wearing our sports gear, Padres gear, for when they have their game. And we had a brand standard we tried to keep and hold up, and the easy answer is yes, because it costs us nothing, but the attitude of the office changed significantly. And then my daughter now works at Costco, and they have theme days. Costco employees can wear whatever they want, but they'll have different theme days, and she gets so excited about what she's going to wear that day. There's no way that her production's not higher than what it normally is, because she's already going into work high. So I very simple, right? High impact and zero effort, because all I had to do was say yes.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. And most of those things are really easy when companies start talking about change. They think we have no budget for that, right? Yeah. What I've learned is that you pretty much don't need a budget. Yeah. For 2 years, all we did was the Power Network and the wheels, right? Yeah. We did spend quite a few $1,000s on wheels, but they were really good wheels. But that in itself, everything else was like the barcodes. I mean, that barcode example that I used actually. We spent a lot of time teaching the team. My team would say things like, I don't do maths, right? And we talk about return on investment, but they all know whether or not they're getting a good deal on their utilities, what mobile phone contract they need for their teenage daughter versus themselves, how much their grocery shopping is when it's in the cart, approximately. So they do maths, right? They just think they don't. And So we spent a lot of time teaching the team how to do return on investment. And there was one idea, which literally was that idea of, there's a series of safety tests that are done. So you program, you put in these codes, and we literally used a barcode scanner and a free barcode generation app and generate the barcodes. And that one project alone saved $20,000 a year in time from people like misinputting things. And I think that actually, those things are, I think that recording and reporting of those things is also really important, because it shows the value. And sometimes it's difficult at the start to sort of show the dollar value of these things, right? But there's definitely, and there's an unmeasurable value in terms of, how your team feel about coming to work, right? I think culture is how your team feels about going to work on a Monday morning and a Sunday night, right? And that it has all these things have a huge impact on that. But eventually the business wants to understand this time that we're investing in doing these things, and this money that we're investing, what is the impact of that. And we did over 10 years we did more than $10 million of cost avoidance at Optos, just with those, and that was for 2 hours every Tuesday. And it's and we only measured it, so it's annualised cost avoidance, so we only got to record the cost avoidance for a year, and then it was part of just how we get things done, more than $10 million. And if you'd started off by saying we need to save $1 million a year, nobody would have known how to do it, and yet they all knew how to do it. Right? We just had to add it up.
Add it up. So for those who don't know, you've mentioned the Kaizen time every Tuesday morning. So fantastic concept. Can you just give us a brief overview of what Kaizen is?
Yeah, so Kaizen is a Japanese word, and Kaizen is really just improvements, right? So it's nothing more than that. And it can be anything from, I guess you talked about the desk and, putting tape around your mouse and that kind of thing, right? So it can be that workplace organisation type thing. We would call that in manufacturing, we'd call it 5S. There are 5 Japanese words, all starting with S. And you sort and all that kind of thing. So it's sort of, 5S probably has the biggest impact on how a workplace looks, right? Because it looks organised and it's tidy, but it's not a system unless you get to the 5th S, which is sustain, right? Otherwise it is just tidying up, and then it gets messy and you tidy up again. So it's all things like that. It's about making sure that the tools that you have, you have tools that you need to do your job every day. Are they where they need to be? It's about using visual management for that type of thing, so you can see before you start, and you're not rummaging about in a drawer to try and find things, or going to get it from the other room because someone else couldn't find theirs, so they just borrowed yours. All that sort of stuff. It can be as simple as putting a hook up to hold something, and it can be as complicated as actually trying to work out why 1 in 5 of those things fails as it comes through that test, right? So we set up, in manufacturing in particular, we set up a lot of metrics to understand how long things take to go through each process stage, how many times things have to be reworked, and all that kind of thing. So it can be as complicated as having a project that you work on over weeks at a time, or something that can actually be done because it's about sorting out an area, and then the next week you're going to make the shadow board and all that kind of thing. And for us, Kaizen time was always time to work on the things that you don't have time to work on, right? So you never get round to it. And if it's going to take you a whole week to do, you will never take a week out to let someone do that. But you'll let them do it at 2 hours a week, every week. You will get it done. Right, it will take longer, but you'll actually never start it if you wait to have the week the other way, So,
exactly.
So it's that kind of thing, but it's really just, and we we supported it to start off with some continuous improvement engineers and manufacturing engineers who helped the different teams in the different areas talk about what they wanted to work on and help structure it. A lot of times they might have needed to buy a few small things and they didn't know how to go and order things, so those guys would go and order the stuff for them and get the things and help them. Or if they were wanting to update a work instruction or a route card, then those guys would help them to do that kind of thing. So that's really what Kaizen Time is. It's about work on improvements, and it can be anything from, I don't know, like if you've got a piece of paper that you use all the time but it gets grubby and all that kind of thing, it can be simple as laminating that bit of paper, right? So that you have it and it doesn't, it really can be that simple. It's any small improvement.
I like that. And then one thing that whether it's right or not, what I've taken from Kaizen is that it's not a system for perfection, it's a system for improvement. So it allows you to try, right? You can try something, and if it doesn't work, just reassess and make the appropriate adjustments. It's not I don't do it if it's not perfect. It's let's try it, right? Let's just constantly try to get better.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest things that I've learned, and I guess that my teams have learned, is when things don't go right? Because you thought it was going to work, so it didn't work. So and that sort of self-learning from that process of analyse it and then try again, right? Like really look at it. One of the most powerful things I went to, there's so we had at Optos, they also have a facility in Boston, and the Greater Boston Manufacturing Partnership have the Northeast Shingle Prize Conference every year in Massachusetts, and I went to that and I listened to a man talk about something that went better than expected, right? And I know it was a safety concern that it went better than expected, because he was talking about a small modular nuclear reactor on a submarine, right? But it was way more efficient than the modelling had predicted. And everybody was like, great result, and he was like, no, you need to go back and look at why that went better, right? And so I think that was the thing that taught me, you need to analyse your successes as well as your failures, right? And we spend a lot of time analysing our failures, but we should also look at our successes to work out, why did that work? Because because then, next time when you're looking at why did that not work, and you're going, it worked before, why did it not work this time? It's probably some subtle difference, something that you didn't quite look at before. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm a big believer in failing faster. So just let's hurry up and find out whether it worked or not, and then make it better and move on.
Yep, absolutely. And I love what you said earlier about just asking how somebody fixed one of their problems, because while I have never tried to figure out how to make lipsticks faster and produce them quicker, I'm sure there's lots I can steal from that concept and that idea. And while I'm sitting here now, so one of my challenges is we do about 1.8 million in just under 2,000 square feet. I've got 3 exam lanes. I've got 1 pretest room. I can't move. Just the way the traffic patterns are, there's nowhere for me to go. I'm in a strip mall. I've got wonderful businesses on either side of me, so I can't expand or anything else. So I've got to do more with the space I have. And so it got me thinking just on this call, maybe I need to look at how busy restaurants manage the flow of their people coming in and out, right? Who's moving that many people efficiently without making them feel rushed to have things squared away.
Yep. I mean, definitely, I absolutely agree. And I think, if you want to understand how to keep people occupied in a queuing system, then you need to go to Disney, right? Because that's what that is all about. But I a long time ago, I was at another lecture, and it was a hotel, and there was complaints about waiting for the elevators, right? And there's not enough elevators. We need more elevators. This is terrible. And it was a really old building and they couldn't really put any more in, and they'd have to lose bedrooms in order to be able to do something like that, so they're thinking they're not going to do that. Actually what they did, but all of this sort of, when you have like the suggestion box or the complaints or whatever, then that's all what it was about. And actually how they reduced I think they reduced the number of complaints by about 90%. All they did was put mirrors in at the elevators, right?
Really?
So people could look at themselves. I guess this was in the days before cell phones, right? Where everybody's just like that, and time gets eaten up by that stuff. But yeah, they put mirrors in at the elevators, and then people were looking at themselves or looking at other people, and their perception of how long they had to wait completely reduced. And that stuff I find that stuff quite genius, right? That it's just like, I don't even know whose idea that was, right? But that was brilliant. And I don't know how they came up with that idea, but it was fabulous. And so I think you're right, going to see where other people are moving that number of people, how they're accommodating that number of people, how they're making sure that the tables get turned and all that kind of thing. You'll learn so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your idea of again, going elsewhere. I love seeing other practices, even in the space that I'm in, other optometry practices, because they do some really unique things that, quite frankly, a lot of the stuff I've stolen, they all thought was just, not that impressive. And I was blown away by what they did.
Yep.
So it's those simple little things that make a world of a difference. And not just knowing myself as a practice owner, but taking my key people to say, hey, go talk to your counterpart over there, see what they're doing, what challenges do they have, and you can probably help them, and they'll share your challenges and they'll help you.
Absolutely. And I think it's I think even a lot of times these are your competitors that you're going to potentially, but actually you can steal their great ideas, you can't steal their culture, and the same thing happens the other way around as well. So I don't see any issue with sharing stuff like that with competitors, right? Because you'll both learn something, you'll both become better, and that's better for everybody. Oh,
for sure. It's I always joke that the Yankees aren't the Yankees without the Red Sox, right? If you don't have Barcelona is not Barcelona without Madrid. If you don't have the big rivalries that push each other higher, right? It's just it's not nearly as much fun or exciting.
Yeah.
So, very cool. Well, this is super helpful, Sarah. If anybody's listening who says, I need to do this, but I just can't get out of my own box, what resources do you recommend? Are there books? Are there courses? Are there philosophies in addition to the Kaizen that you have directed people to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer, so I bought a lot of books, right? And the thing is that the thing that complicates it, the books have all the theories in them, and then people don't behave like the books. The rest of the people have not read the books, so it doesn't quite work like that, right? But there are a lot of different resources online and things. I mean, one of my favourites is Toast Kaizen, right? Now, you would think there's not very many ways to improve toast, but Toast Kaizen actually, and then there's also the next version, which is Beer Kaizen, but so whatever, your preference is, but it talks about sort of standard work and, making sure that you give good and clear instruction and how everybody interprets things differently, and how do you eventually get to a standard process for those types of things. So there's lots of resources online that you can go and look at, and now with AI, there's probably even more things that you can go and do and just kind of put in, like, how have people solved this type of problem? You'll probably get pointed to lots of resources there that you can have a look at. But
so when you say Toast Kaizen, you're talking about, like, I put bread in the toaster?
Yes.
Toast? Like how?
Toast.
I'm going to learn how to make
toast.
Better toast.
Right.
Fascinating.
No, it is really. And actually, so they have at the Shingo, the Northeast Shingo Prize, they actually have the Silver Toaster Award for improvements and things like that. And I think one of the things that really has fascinated me, obviously with all my time at Optos, and I toured a lot of your Vision Source guys round there, is actually how these manufacturing concepts translate to other industries, and that's because manufacturing's about flow, right? And your businesses are about flow, excuse me, as well. So you're about flow of patients through your practice. We're about flow of devices or widgets, whatever, through a factory. So I think, go and look at, I would encourage everybody to go and look at some of these manufacturing type organisations. There'll be lots of local ones. Obviously, I know about the Boston ones and I know about the ones here, not quite sure, over on the West Coast. But there'll be all sorts of different manufacturing groups. And actually, that's probably a good place to go and look for these resources and even talk to some of those local groups, get someone in to sort of talk to you a bit more about Kaizen and about some of those improvements. And, there'll be things for, so we call it line side stock. We have, different items in line side stock and all that kind of thing, and stock rotations and stuff that you guys that be entirely appropriate for, within your practices as well. You have stock that needs to rotate and all that kind of thing. And so I think,
cool.
just go and look for manufacturing. You'll learn everything you need to know.
I love it. Well, Sarah, this is it's amazing how fast 45 minutes goes. This has been
I know.
Incredibly enlightening. I got a whole page of notes, and my team, I thank you ahead of time. My team might not be thanking you right now, but they've got all sorts of stuff we're putting on their plate to get creative and think.
Excellent. Yeah.
I love it.
But, if anybody's got anything, if anybody's listening and they think, I'd like to know a bit more about that, I'm really happy to talk about this for hours and hours on end, as you know very well, Aaron. So, you can just hit me up on LinkedIn or something like that. I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Perfect. And I'll put your contact info in the show notes, so if anybody wants to get a hold of you. And I can second that, because I think we sat for 2 hours over coffee, and it was I think we did. I was bummed when the conversation ended, because it was just so engaging and exciting and cool. So you just have this energy about you that I love. So I appreciate talking then. I appreciate you making time now. And
thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks, Sarah.
Take care. Bye.